UFC Fight Night Moreno versus Royval is coming up this weekend, and today, guys, I am breaking down every fight on the card, starting from the bottom to the top. I am very excited with timestamps, by the way, if you'd like to hear my take on any particular fight. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I'm your guy with many YouTube channels. Let's break down the entire card. Starting off with Claudio Puelles versus Ziam. Now, Claudio Puelles, man, oh boy, okay, because this guy, what's very interesting, the Prince of Peru, everybody was kind of looking at this guy like, oh man, okay, guys, we got to watch out for this dude. Claudio Puelles, this guy will get you to the ground. He'll put you in an E-bar, right? And that's how most of his career went, because you could see a lot of controlling decision and submission wins, and everybody started really paying attention to him when he submitted Clay Guida. But the problem with that is the Dan Hooker fight. The Dan Hooker fight was just a horrible, horrible performance. There's nothing to say about that, right? Claudio Puelles, the shift and narrative on this dude has 110% completely changed. But at the end of the day, you still really have to worry about this guy's ground game because he's very slick, very quick, and very, very good at leg locks and knee bars. He's taken on Ziam, who it's going to be a very interesting stylistic matchup, to be honest with you, because this guy is a very technical fighter who he'll stay where he's comfortable. If you're a kickboxer, he won't engage with you in kickboxing. He's very smart, okay? But the game plan for Ziam is he is not going to be the guy. If he knocks down Claudio Puelles, he is not going to be following him to the ground because there is a risk there. This dude is a very, very technical, I'm going to keep to myself type fighter, and he's very good at doing that. He's coming off of two really, really nice wins where, again, just won some nice decision wins. Looked okay doing so. There was nothing spectacular about him. So this brings me to the pick because I was just so horribly disgusted by Claudio Puelles' last performance. Could you, I can't believe how that dude looked. And it's not one of those oh my god, this is a one-off performance, right? This dude, I just completely changed my shift on him. I don't say that about a lot of fighters, to be honest with you, but the risk is always there for him to win, especially with his ground game. Unless he comes back in, he's like, I want to change the narrative because, again, all of the fans have really shifted gear on him. I have to go with Ziam to win this fight because, again, he is a very, very safe fighter, and you don't see that with, too many fighters. I like the fact that he will actively avoid the ground. He's not going to be the type of fighter who's like, well, it's no problem. I'm better than you on the ground. He's just not going to take any risk. He's going to come. He's going to stand up. He's probably going to just kind of try to implement Dan Hooker's game plan, to be honest with you. I'm not 100% nearly on this pick, but I do like Ziam to win this fight. Moving on to the next fight, we have Quinonez taking on Raoni Barcelos. Now, I'm really excited for this fight because I like watching Quinonez fight a lot. Raoni Barcelos is actually pretty good himself, but so you have Quinonez, who is a very, very fun forward pressure, I want to destroy you type style. He's very good at coming forward. He wants to take your head off. He wants to submit you no matter what. This dude gets in there and he's ready to scrap, but he's taken on Raoni Barcelos, who, in my opinion, is better than his recent track record from 2023 to 2021. This dude can hang with some of the best, and he has lost. The majority of his recent losses have been to very good opponents. Recently coming, honestly, losing to Umar Nurmagomedov, and Kyler Phillips. And in some of these performances that he's lost, he's shown a really, really high level scrap. He's just falling behind a little bit on some of these fights. So I would not count this guy out. This dude has no problem getting into a high level scrap. And what I mean by that is he will go in there, he can go into the chaos, and he has no issue scrapping with you. This is kind of like the technical brawl kind of thing that you see from some fighters. So this fight is absolutely going to be a war. I can't wait for it. I think both guys, this is tough because I think both guys are a little bit similar in skill level. That's why it's a little bit tough to pick, and that's why I'm excited for the fight, to be honest with you. But I can't not pick Quinonez here. He's 27 years old, fighting a 36-year-old, almost 37-year-old. And while he lacks a little bit in the reach advantage, for a dude that pushes the pace like Quinonez does, I would imagine that somebody that's almost 37 years old will have a little bit of issues dealing with that. But the problem is Quinonez can sometimes fight really, really careless. He'll go in there, he'll want to take your head off, and he's very, very open for counters. If he takes you down and wants to ground and pound you, his arm will be open for arm bars. So whenever Quinonez fights, no matter who he's fighting, there is a hole there where he will, again, get too caught up in the war, and the potential for him is to lose is there. But I don't think that, again, I gotta go with the guy who's not 37 fighting somebody who's going to come in and put on a huge pressure performance. So I'm going to pick Christian Quinonez to win this fight at a medium level of confidence. Moving on to the next fight, I am very excited for this because I love watching Muhammad Naimov fight, and he's taking on Erik Silva. Erik Silva, who's bouncing back from his first loss that we've seen in recent history because he came onto the Contender Series looking really good, but then of course the submission artist actually ended up getting submitted by TJ Brown, which was a little bit shocking to quite a few people, but regardless, I'm still not here to count Erik Silva out. A lot of people were saying hype train derailed. It's going to be really tough for Erik Silva to really make his way back because he's 36 years old, almost 37 years old. That's a little bit of an issue, especially when you have a guy who's so high pressure. He wants to come in, he wants to take you down, he wants to submit you, but he's taking on Muhammad Naimov, who everybody was kind of a little bit unsure about where he fit because he came into the UFC. This dude came in, he destroyed Jamie Mullarkey on short notice, right? And, well, I mean, okay, destroyed wasn't the right way to say it, but the way the fight ended was a little bit destruction. But then he took on Nathaniel Wood, which was a very interesting performance, and it really made me see. It kind of convinced me, well, not that he's going to be anything special, Muhammad Naimov, but he's convinced me that he is a very good fighter. So this was a very close fight. I remember people were talking about it being a robbery. I thought this fight could have honestly gone either way, but in this fight, Muhammad Naimov finally took on a great contender in Nathaniel Wood. This was his first test. He showed a little bit of everything. He showed that he has a nice, well-rounded skill set. A lot of people were counting him out, but he proved in this fight that he absolutely belongs. Now, in saying this, I'm not completely convinced that he's going to be like some sort of killer top contender, but I will believe in Muhammad Naimov when he is taking on a fighter like Erik Silva. Erik Silva's game plan will be to come in, take you down, work you from there, try to submit you, but Muhammad Naimov definitely has a nice all-around skill set with great power to back it up. I am very high on this dude at the moment. He's in his prime, taking on somebody who's almost 37 years old. I like Muhammad Naimov a lot in this matchup, and I think he's going to win this fight. Moving on to the next fight, honestly, another banger because, like I said, guys, the UFC really wants Mexico City to have good cards because whoever did the matchmaking for this card is absolutely fantastic. We have the debut of Luis Rodrigues, and he's taking on Dennis Bondar. I'll start with Luis Rodrigues because if you remember, a long time ago, we did see this guy in the Contender Series, and he has a 16-2 record, and if you take a look at any of his fights, they kind of end in any way. This dude has a very nice all-round skill set, but the problem is that skill set has not been applied to anybody in particular. His only loss in recent history, I don't know off the top of my head, but a man, of course, he only has 2 losses. He has been on an insane streak, lost in the Contender Series, and then went on another insane streak. So this guy, I don't know actually why he got the call to the UFC, but hey, you know what? He's here. He has a very nice all-around skill set, and he's taking on Dennis Bondar, who I don't want to say has a nice all-around skill set, but this dude actually ends up absolutely anywhere when he fights because this dude will swing wild at you and he'll take you down. It's just like, you don't really know what Dennis Bondar does. He literally lives up to the name Psycho. He comes in, goes psycho. You don't know if he's going to start winging punches at you. You don't know if he's going to wrestle you. You don't know if he's going to pick you up, dunk you on your head. Regardless, it is very exciting watching Dennis Bondar fight, okay? He has not been able to get a win in the UFC yet. He lost to Malcolm Gordon by TKO. And then Carlos Hernandez, he lost a decision here, but in this fight, he was really in the fight. Hernandez just had an on... in my opinion, I don't really take away from him because when you watch some fighters and they just happen to like have an on night. I think that was Carlos Hernandez that night. I just think he had an on night. I think Carlos Hernandez, the way he was flown in that octagon, I think he would have beat anybody on that night. So I know it sounds kind of dumb, but I don't take much from that loss. I know it's against Carlos Hernandez, but like, I don't know, guys. I hope you kind of understand what I'm saying in the moment. So both of these guys are in a must-switch situation. Dennis Bondar needs to prove that he's here and belongs in the UFC. Luis Rodrigues has finally gotten his opportunity. He knows he needs to be here. So you have the technical striker versus the guy who comes in going psycho. Anything can happen when a guy comes in and goes psycho on you. But I will have to... Oh, that's tough, man. That's tough because, again, Luis Rodrigues has not fought anybody. And he seems to be a good fighter. This one, I don't know, man. I don't know. If you made me pick, I'd pick Dennis Bondar just because of the level of competition that he's shown. He can go in there. He really can beat anybody. He also has a little bit of a reach advantage over Luis Rodrigues, but this one's a really, really tough fight to pick. But I will pick Dennis Bondar for my prediction. Moving on to the next fight in what is another fantastic fight. This card is crazy, and I cannot wait to watch it. We have Jesus Aguilar taking on Meteus Mendonca. We have Jesus Aguilar, who is very, very exciting. Well, both the guys are very exciting, but this dude has some very technical striking and the BJJ skills to back it up. And he is very, very good at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This dude doesn't just control you. This dude doesn't just take you down. This dude actively works for submissions, and he gets submissions. He came off the Contender Series with a really nice win, bounced back against Tatsuro Taira and had a little bit of a hiccup there, but then he came back against Shannon Ross and actually got a knockout, something that a lot of people did not expect. I'm not saying they didn't pick him to win. I'm saying to get a knockout. This dude has some very, very underrated stand-up game. He is a jiu-jitsu fighter, but he can hang with you on the feet. But speaking of hanging out with you on the feet, you have Meteus Mendonca, who has not been able to get a win in UFC. Came on to the Contender Series. Everybody was hyping this guy up because he trains with Charles Oliveira. Then he ended up getting a knockout. He looked good there, but then he lost to Javid Bashrat and both Nate Maness. It's tough because Javid Bashrat, I wholeheartedly believe in this dude. I think he is one of the best unranked talent at the moment. And then the Nate Maness fight, they just went to the ground right away. And Mendonca tried to get a bunch of submissions, and he just got ground and pounded until he got knocked out, right? So I still think that Meteus Mendonca is a good fighter. He just hasn't been able to put it together. You have both guys who actually, both of them have very solid stand-up and very solid jiu-jitsu. Both guys can enter chaos, and this is why, like I said, it's a very, very interesting fight. I'm leaning towards Meteus Mendonca to win this fight because he does seem like the more dangerous guy when it comes to the feet. But again, like, Jesus Aguilar is very good. Like, he just got a knockout. But Meteus Mendonca, training with all of those guys over at Shootbox, I would imagine would be able to kind of negate the jiu-jitsu attacks that Jesus Aguilar has that would come at him, and that's his main game, but that leaves the potential to being knocked out, being stood up. But Mendonca also has really good striking himself. A very exciting fight. Honestly, it's fairly, sorry, my dog is right at my side here, but it's a very, very tough fight to pick, man. But I will be picking Meteus Mendonca just because, honestly, of all the high-level athletes that he has, and I feel like that would help him on the ground. That leaves up in the standing, and I would imagine he's a little bit more dangerous when standing up. Next up on the list, we have Victor Altamirano taking on Felipe dos Santos, another guy from Shootbox, and another fantastic matchup, guys. So we have Victor Altamirano, who hasn't been able to put together a win streak. We've seen him for a little while now since the Contender Series win, but even then that was a split decision win. Then, of course, lost to Carlos Hernandez in a split decision. Was able to get 2 wins where he looked pretty good, but then he lost to Tim Elliott, where there was a serious hole exposed in his game. He had huge issues with takedowns and ground and pound, and Tim Elliott was able to use that to his advantage, and that might play into this matchup because he's taking on Felipe dos Santos, who was looking very good himself and actually just lost his first fight coming into the UFC against Manel Kape. It wasn't a horrible performance. Manel Kape was able to do what he had to do right. He still was able to showcase his skills, but Felipe dos Santos is your typical shootbox fighter, and honestly, I feel like all of these shootbox guys typically come in with the same game plan. Now, again, everybody can, like, they all adapted Charles Oliveira, which is weird to me. So you have, like, a worse version of Charles Oliveira taking on Victor Altamirano. Victor Altamirano is a very, very good, crisp striker. But again, there were serious holes just exposed about him. And long story short, guys, I'm going to be taking Felipe dos Santos, the guy who will be able to expose the exact same things that Tim Elliott did. And it wasn't just like, oh my God, there's a hole. I was like, oh boy, this is a big hole. So I do like Felipe dos Santos in this fight. Victor Altamirano will definitely have a little bit of an edge in the boxing department, but even then, Felipe dos Santos can come in there and just kind of make things a little bit chaotic. It's tough to say where that fight would go when it comes down to that, but I believe Felipe dos Santos will come in here, try to utilize the takedown, expose that brand new thing that we've seen from Victor Altamirano now, and I believe Felipe dos Santos will come away with a win in this fight. Give me Felipe dos Santos for my pick. Moving on to the next fight, guys, we have to break this fight down again. And I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not going to spend too much time on it because we've talked about it a long time and we've seen these guys fight. It was very strange. We saw the fight was going. So we have Edgar Chairez versus Daniel Lacerda. These two have fought before. The fight did not last long, but it was a very, very weird fight. What's interesting is Lacerda was really, really winning, but Sherez found a standing guillotine in there. But in the standing guillotine, Lacerda's arm went limp. He looked like he wasn't out, but after the fight got stopped, it was like exactly like a Lawler versus Askren situation. It seemed like he was completely 100% awake, but Daniel Lacerda was really winning this fight. Really, really winning, and Edgar Sherez was the guy who found the submission. His arm went limp. I don't care what anybody says. That was a good stoppage. That was a good stoppage in my opinion. So you could say Edgar Sherez won the first fight. Other than that, it's really tough because we've broken down this fight before. We saw what happened. Daniel Lacerda was really, really winning until he got caught. How am I supposed to pick this fight now? I don't know. You have Daniel Lacerda, who is in literally a must-win situation, and kind of the same thing with Edgar Sherez. At this point, if you're betting, I'm like, nuh-uh, I don't want to bet on this fight. Get me out of here. It's so tough to say, but logic dictates to pick Edgar Sherez, right? But again, Daniel Lacerda was really winning the fight. I'm going to pick Edgar Sherez again, guys. I just am, but this is going to be a weird one to watch. Really quick, guys, sorry to put a pause on the video here. I just want to say if you are interested in joining the channel membership, you can see exactly where I am putting my money where my mouth is. If you are interested in seeing past bets, how the membership bets have done, you can check out complete betting guide videos that have been on the channel. This next betting guide will be out either tomorrow or the next day if you're interested to see how this recent card went. I actually don't know how it went, but I'm pretty confident in what I was picking because I'm recording this before UFC 298. Regardless, if you're interested, join the membership. Very cheap compared to other channels. Regardless, I'm happy you're here. Thank you very much for watching the video. Thank you for listening to this little pause here. Moving on to the main card, we have Daniel Zellhuber taking on Francisco Prado. Now, Daniel Zellhuber is an interesting one because I was never really, and I don't mean to say this now because we've seen him have a lackluster performance, but like, you'll have to take my word. I'm not just being like that. Daniel Zellhuber, I was never that high on. And everybody, a lot of people were talking about this guy. Hey, he's going to be the next big thing to come out of Mexico, right? I wasn't feeling it. Now, we've seen him for a little while now, right? He ended up losing to Trey Ogden, but then bounced back with two pretty nice wins. But this one is not a nice win. This Chris Giagos fight, this fight, he was losing literally the entire fight, even with his massive reach advantage. He ended up catching Giagos with a good shot, which ended up making Giagos end up shooting on the way in. Zellhuber was able to snatch up an insanely quick anaconda. So, you know what? That speaks to his, I don't know. I don't want to say fight IQ because he didn't show any. He's capable of winning anywhere, right? So, in this fight, and this is a big time performance in my opinion, his fight IQ is lacking big time. He did not learn any tendencies from his opponent. He kept eating the same counter shots and the same counters over and over again without changing one thing. Even the commentators were saying something. That's really saying something. So Daniel Zellhuber, while he got a win here, I'm not feeling the dude anymore. But in reality, he is a very good, big, lengthy striker. He's taken on Francisco Prado, who is also, and my puppy's here again, sorry, is a very good striker in himself. In saying that, though, he relies more on his power than he does actual technique. There is times where he gets caught up in the fight and he'll just be there ready trying to take your head off, while the point being he loses a little bit of technique, but he does have a good clinch game. He's capable of taking it to the ground. He's very young in his game, has a little bit of nice experience for his age. He's coming off of a shocking win to a lot of people, that being against Otman Zaytar. Now, it depends how you want to look at that, how shocking it is, because some people were taking a look at Otman Zaytar and saying the Matt Frevola loss was a one-off, but he happened to get KO'd again. And the Prado, honestly, at this point in his career, at this point in his UFC career, we know that he can and is more capable of knocking out pretty much anybody. And that's the big worry you have with Francisco Prado. So you have Daniel Zellhuber, who has a clear striking advantage, in my opinion. I believe he will be, if this fight's standing, he'll be all over Francisco Prado. And wow, I just realized that these guys are both really young. Again, fantastic matchmaking by the UFC. Daniel Zellhuber will be more technical. He will do better. But what if the same thing happens? What if Francisco Prado ends up catching him with the same kind of counter like he was in his last fight? Francisco Prado isn't the right guy to just be eating the same counter over and over about. So is that going to happen again? I have no faith in Daniel Zellhuber until he shows me that he has improved and can make adjustments in that octagon, because That was a big time problem in my opinion, this last performance that he just had. But at the end of the day, I still will be picking him to get the job done. I don't believe Francisco Prado is technical enough on the stand-up to really take care of Daniel Zellhuber. And while the reach is similar, unlike the last fight of Daniel Zellhuber, I still think that he will have the striking advantage. It just really, really worries me when a fighter does not make any adjustments, you know? But I will be picking Daniel Zellhuber to still win this fight. Moving on to the next fight, we have the return of Raul Rosas Jr., and he's taking on Ricky Turquoise. Now, guys, the UFC wants Raul Rosas Jr. to win. This is a fairly quick breakdown because you have a guy who has a well-known ground game issue and just likes to strike versus a guy who has been doing very, very well on the ground. And you could argue, I would argue that he's a BJJ specialist, right? But the problem is, we've seen Raul Rosas Jr. Here's the thing, okay? Came into the UFC. Everybody was hyped on this guy. Everybody talking about him being the next youngest champion. Got a great win over Jay Perrin, which means nothing. But then Christian Rodriguez put a halt to that. Put an absolute halt to that. Hype train absolutely derailed. But then he bounced back in the Terrence Mitchell fight where he came in swinging and found a huge KO. So, I don't know. Well, you can tell that his mind definitely isn't deterred. This dude still has the will to win. It's a little bit tough to say like how I feel about Raul Rosas Jr. I don't know where he fits, but he's taken on Ricky Turquoise, who has had mixed success in the UFC. We've seen him a few times now. This dude comes in, he wants to swing, he wants to keep it standing, he wants to use his volume to overwhelm you, but the UFC sees something in this matchup. They, of course, want Raul Rosas Jr. to win in Mexico City. They're going to see him just, here's how it's going to go, in my opinion, okay? I'd be shocked if it didn't take place this way. Ricky Turquoise comes in, swinging like crazy. Raul Rosas Jr. gets a takedown. Raul Rosas Jr. gets a submission. That's how the UFC wants it to go. That's probably how every single other UFC predictor on YouTube is going to put it. Honestly, I'd be shocked if that wasn't the case. Maybe I'm just over here having a weird opinion, but that's how I see this fight going. The pick's going to be Raul Rosas Jr., but then again, he might just flop again. I'm still picking Raul Rosas Jr. to win this fight. Moving on to the next fight, we have another great fight. I hope I'm not annoying saying that, guys. Honestly, every fight on here is really good. You have Manuel Torres taking on Chris Duncan, who both guys have been on quite the quiet win streak. I'll start with Chris Duncan because he had a loss in the Contender Series, and that's his only loss, and that's against Vieshev Borshev, who, I mean, make of that what you will, but after that, he got a nice win, bounced back on the Contender Series and looked great, and looked amazing ever since. Well, I don't want to say amazing. I want to say he's looked very, very good. He's a very fun fighter. He has no problem with wherever the fight goes. He'll take you down. He'll keep you up. His striking lacks a little bit of technical work, but this dude has the heart and will to win. He is coming off of a very, very tough performance, which honestly, it was just a really, really tough fight on both ends, but it was primarily on the feet, and that's where Chris Duncan probably prefers it to be, and Duncan just won most exchanges. He's taking on Manuel Torres, who's bouncing back off of a really nice win himself against Nicholas Mata, who a lot of people were counting him out in this fight, and he came in, nothing to say, got a quick elbow knockout, but before that, this dude has put together quite the quiet win streak. He is very, very good on the feet. Again, isn't the most technical fighter, but this dude carries very, very big power. Both these guys carry big power. Chris Duncan can utilize a wrestling. Manuel Torres doesn't typically. Manuel Torres does. I mean, like, if you're looking at it from a striking perspective, Manuel Torres does use his range a little bit better than Chris Duncan does. Chris Duncan doesn't really use his range at all, but that reach advantage does matter when you're having a guy like Manuel Torres. So, here's the thing. Both guys are very, very heavy-handed. Both guys have no problem coming, and both guys have no problem starting a war with each other. The question is, who's going to be on the right side of that war? Well, you have Chris Duncan, who can explore the ground game, but it's not necessarily a weakness of Manuel Torres. It's just we've seen Chris Duncan able to take fights to the ground. Other than that, I am leaning towards Chris Duncan in this pick because like I said, this is going to be a stand-up bang fight probably, and both guys are going to want to take each other's head off. We know Chris Duncan is almost impossible to put away. This dude can get knocked down and get up like it's nothing and have like a heart that's on like that other level that you've seen from some fighters. We have not necessarily seen those situations from Manuel Torres yet. He does have finishing instincts. He does have huge power, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to put away a guy like Chris Duncan. Like I said, it's been happened before, but I like my chances with Chris Duncan. This is definitely, when the betting guide comes out, one that I don't think that anybody should be really betting on unless you're really looking at the under. But then again, with Chris Duncan, I don't know. Very, very tough fight. Very, very fun fight, but I like the survivability of Chris Duncan here and the option to go for takedowns, maybe make Manuel Torres worry a little bit. I'm going to pick Chris Duncan to win this fight. Moving on to the next fight, we have the return of Yasmin Yaragui taking on Sam Hughes. Now, this is an interesting fight because a lot of people, myself included, and it depends how you want to look at it for the division, to be honest with you, because Yasmin Yaragui wasn't somebody like I was like, oh my God, watch out for this girl. But at the same time, when it comes to the women's strawweight division, there is a big skill gap in a lot of certain fighters, and Yasmin Yaragui does seem like the type of girl who can slip her way into the top 10, right? She is a very, very good striker who can be hittable at times, and she does have grappling to back it up. Coming to the UFC, she was completely undefeated, steamrolling the majority of her opponents, but having a little bit of hiccups in some fights here and there. She coming off of a great fight against Estela Nunes where she got a ground and pound TKO. She ran into Denise Gomes, who knocked her out. So the hype train was absolutely stopped right there. But at the end of the day, I still think Yasmin is on the more top side of talent when it comes to the strawweight division. But speaking of top talent, somebody that we don't have is Sam Hughes, who brings in your typical WMMA game. Some striking, some grappling. There's nothing special to it, but she doesn't absolutely suck. You can see she's gotten some okay wins off of some okay opponents, but at the end of the day, there is absolutely nothing special about Sam Hughes. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but this is an easy pick in my opinion. Well, not really, because sometimes Sam Hughes, she can just hold you or just barely outstrike you and somehow get a win, right? Yasmin is hittable, but I just got a good feeling about Yasmin winning this fight. I think she'll be better. She's definitely more vicious, more dangerous. She looks for the knockout. She wants to get a really, really good finish. She'll probably want to get a nice finish in Mexico City, so that would probably help her out here. Sam Hughes. Sometimes she can just scrape by and get a win, but other than that, I think Yasmin Yaragui is just the better fighter in general. She's going to be my pick to win this fight. Moving on to the fantastic co-main event we have going here. It is Yair Rodriguez taking on Brian Ortega for the second time. Yair Rodriguez has fought twice since the Brian Ortega fight, and here's the thing. Yair Rodriguez put Brian Ortega in a submission, and Brian Ortega's shoulder popped out. And people, not a lot of people, but there definitely are fans who like Brian Ortega, like, oh, that doesn't count. It was a freak accident. No, Yair Rodriguez put him in a hold. Yair Rodriguez did end up getting that win. It was wholeheartedly it wasn't shocking that the fight was going to go that way, but I did pick Yair Rodriguez to win. So Brian Ortega, for the fighter that he is, 3 losses, those 3 losses, it really is important to note. It's against Max Holloway. It's against Alexander Volkanovski. It's against Yair Rodriguez. This dude is a solid fighter who, he does have good boxing, but there's been fights, hence Max Holloway, Alexander Volkanovski, where he's been pieced up. So I think that just might prove that he doesn't have that great of boxing. But then again, that's the top talent. I think the dude has good boxing. I do. It's just that he has lost to the best of the best, okay? He can submit everybody. He can beat anybody at any given time. He has heart that is completely unmatched. That was proven in the Alexander Volkanovski fight. But the reality is, Brian Ortega is now exiting his prime at 33 years old, coming off of 2 really rough losses. The Alexander Volkanovski fight was a beatdown. Yair Rodriguez was almost 2 years ago. This dude is going to come into the game with ring rust. Yair Rodriguez has fought twice since. And I've listened to Yair Rodriguez interviews. I followed his career. This dude still wants to be a champion. This dude wants to rematch Alexander Volkanovski. So with him losing a title fight, it has not deterred him at all. But other than that, 18-4 with 2 losses, 1 to Max Holloway again, which he actually had a really good performance, but then he bounced back against Brian Ortega, got the win there. Wholeheartedly deserved, by the way. Josh Emmett destroyed Josh Emmett and then lost to Alexander Volkanovski, but Alexander Volkanovski does that to anybody. You could just erase that loss because Alexander Volkanovski would do that to anybody. Alex beat up Brian Ortega worse than Yair Rodriguez, if that makes any bit of a difference to you. But this is absolutely going to be a striker versus grappler matchup because I would imagine Yair Rodriguez, and we did see a little bit in the beginning of the fight, Yair will be dancing around Brian Ortega. This dude is one of the most dangerous kickers that we have ever seen. And you would say that Brian Ortega can submit you. Yeah, you know what? That's possible. But Yair Rodriguez submitted him. That was shocking to me. I picked Yair Rodriguez to win the fight, but man, I did not expect Yair Rodriguez to submit Brian Ortega. Yair does have an underrated ground game, but of course he'll want to keep this standing. But guys, in reality, Yair Rodriguez is in his prime. He's still hungry. He's one of the most dangerous featherweight contenders out there. One of the best, if not the best kicker in the entirety of the UFC. Brian Ortega is exiting his prime. all the damage that he's taken in his short career is a lot of damage. He's coming in there with ring rust, and you got to question the guy's motivation because he has been healthy and ready to fight for a long time, but he hasn't. I like Yair Rodrigues a lot in this matchup. I think he is going to get the win here. Give me Yair Rodrigues for my official pick. Moving on to the main event, we have Brandon Moreno taking on Brandon Royval for the second time. Now, if you guys didn't know, these guys fought years ago, and that fight ended with a Brandon Moreno finish, but there was a little bit of controversy with an injury there. But regardless, both guys have changed so much and improved so much that I really don't think that the first fight matters. You have two guys, in my opinion, that are incredibly well-rounded, okay? These guys are literally top contenders of the flyweight division, and they wholeheartedly deserve to be there. I would argue, too, that Brandon Moreno is more technical than Brandon Royval because you can find Brandon Royval getting a little bit reckless, a little bit brawly, and you could argue that he lacks the ground game a little bit, but at the end of the day, he does have enough skill set to hang in there with the best of the best. He is one of the best guys. This dude has serious power for the flyweight division. Brandon Moreno has everything. Maybe besides knockout power, actually. But Brandon Moreno is a fantastic, fantastic fighter. He had a great close fight to Alexandre Pantoja, which was one of the greatest fights we've ever seen. But other than that, we've seen a lot of Davison Figueiredo. He finished Kai Kara France. But other than that, Brandon Moreno is absolutely one of the greatest fighters in the UFC. Brandon Royval is coming off after getting a really nice 3-fight win streak, which was shocking to a lot of people, especially with the Meteus Nicolau fight. He ended up losing to Alexandre Pantoja, which he also had a pretty good performance there. It was Pantoja ended up getting the win, but at the end of the day, it was a win by Pantoja, right? He definitely showed that he belongs in championship fights. But another important piece of information that I forgot to mention is Brandon Royval is taking this fight on short notice. I would imagine a month off, a month, 2 months, he's okay, still in shape to fight, but that was a war that he went through with Pantoja. So much damage was dealt in that fight. So much was exerted in that fight. Is he okay? I don't know. And he's definitely not preparing for a guy like Brandon Moreno. Brandon Moreno is still just as hungry enough to get back to that title. He still wants to fight Alexandre Pantoja again, kind of like the Yair Rodrigues situation. This dude is not deterred. This dude wants to get back to the top, and he is in shape preparing for the best of the world. Brandon Royval is one of the best in the world, but I can't pick a Brandon Royval who just went through a war, is coming off the couch on short notice. Yeah, you know what? He can knock out anybody. He can finish anybody. Brandon Royval is that guy, but I think the cards are stacked against him on that. He is biting off more than he can chew, fighting somebody who is just as good as the fighter that he just beat. He's going to be ready to go. He's in his prime. He's in Mexico City, and we know Brandon Moreno thrives there. So I like Brandon Moreno a lot in this matchup. I think he's going to win. For my official pick, I am picking Brandon Moreno. With that being said, though, guys, that puts an end to our full card breakdown and prediction video. Thank you so much for watching the video. Let me know what your picks are down below. And if you are interested, check out this video on the screen. It's an early UFC 299 breakdown. I would love for you guys to check it out. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. Take care.